item on the agenda is a presentation by Region 9 Laura Lewis Makino, Executive Director. Did I pronounce that right?
No, but that's okay. It's
Okay.
Makino. So thank you so much, Mike. And I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight a little bit about Region 9. I know there's some items in your packet, and I believe one is our corporate annual report from our previous fiscal year. And that will give you a little overview of our financial situation, the list of our board members as of last year, our staff, and some of our key programs. So I'm not going to really review it, but it's for your information. And then also you should see 2 of our monthly reports, which is basically a budget list or a bullet list of kind of key activities that we do, excuse me, that being home thing. But basically it's a list in our core program areas of what we have done over the past month. And I give you that because that's something we send to our board of directors. And you are also welcome to get that if you want. Some of our board reps, actually distribute it to their boards as well. So if that's of interest, please let me know. So basically, Region 9 Economic Development District is a federally designated economic development district. In Colorado, there are 14 regions, and we were just kind of boring in naming ourselves Region 9. But basically, we serve the 5-county area of Southwest Colorado, and that includes the 10 cities and towns, such as Cortez and the 2 Indian tribes. And we have a board of directors that includes a representative from all 17 government jurisdictions, and then we have 9 from the private sector. So our board is 26 people. And John, your city manager, as well as Ben, serve as the representative and alternate on our board. We only meet quarterly. Any of you are welcome to attend. Just let me know. We're happy to include you if you're interested in sitting in and learning more. So I guess I want to highlight our 4 core areas that we work in and then give you some statistics and information about how we work in Cortez and what we've been doing specifically for the city. Our first program is a business loan fund. So basically, we provide financing. We get state and federal different funding sources that we can give to businesses. So for example, we were able to provide $200,000 to businesses during COVID. But we also have other various funding sources with different criteria. We do not compete with banks. So we have the same interest rates as banks, and we work closely with banks. Actually, our Cortez satellite office is in the Dolores State Bank, but we tend to fund startup businesses that are not yet bankable. You need to have 2 years of financials as a business before you can get a traditional business bank loan. And then we also work with businesses that have they're not meeting the requirements of a bank. Maybe it's a credit issue. It could also just be a lack of collateral. So we will do those loans. And then we also partner with banks because all of you have banking relationships. And if the bank doesn't want to lose you, so if they can't fund all of what you need, then we can come in and fund the uncollateralized piece of that. So that's really how we work. Our loan fund right now, we've been very successful. We're over 30 years old. Our loan fund of active loans is $7 million. We have right now, basically those funds get paid back and put back into loans in the community, but we're able to keep our dues to our members very low because we're able to pay for our staffing from the interest of those loans that get paid back. So we're hoping, and this is our sustainability model, if we can reach that $10 million level, we can sustain our overhead with our loan fund. We ask for $3,600 a year from the city of Cortez. We have it based on population, and hopefully we provide value. That's for you to decide. And that's one reason I'm here, just to give you an update of what we do for you. But we do like getting dues from the governments, even in a small amount, because we're able to leverage that and get additional funding, which I can talk about as well. And please ask me questions if you have any, or I can just answer questions at the end. So our second program is we're a state data affiliate. We work closely with the state demography office. So we do data, very exciting, just kidding. So we are involved with the census, for example. So Montezuma County and the local count committees have done an amazing job. But if you didn't have that local count committee, that would be our responsibility. And so we try to kind of oversee and check in on how that is going. You guys are beating the region in terms of your response rate compared to some others. So good job. And then we actually collaborated with the COG on some funding to help fund some of the census materials in all of the region. We also do data. I'm not sure if I put it in your packet, but we just updated our economic snapshot, which is basically a little booklet of data for 2020. I can send that to Linda to distribute. But we try to have data materials so that governments can make good decisions because they have good information. For example, we did some economic impact studies on Hampton Inn back when they were looking at coming into Cortez to measure what the impact would be in the income that it could generate as well as tax revenue. And that's available on our website. We also did an economic impact on visitors to the Ute Mountain Roundup last year, and we have that report available. And then also the Montezuma County Heritage Museum, when they were looking at whether they wanted to do something there, we were able to kind of measure that impact of if that occurred, and it did. So data is our second program. A third is really our core economic development services. And that includes just having our satellite office, working with the governments, working with businesses and communities where they're at. One thing we do is strategic planning. Gosh, we sound so boring, data planning, ugh. But we're keepers of the community action plans for each county. And how that relates to you is when you have a community project, trails, whatever it will be, usually when you apply for state or federal funding, they ask, are you in a community plan? And so basically we're the keeper of that list with all the municipalities and region to make sure you're in a plan when you apply for funding. And we update that every 2 years. Heather in our office will be starting that process. And what we would do is we meet with the city on your projects that need to be in the plan, decide which ones are completed that we take off or that priorities have changed. So we work with you on that, and that gets approved at a county level. But I don't know if the press is on this call, but I'm just kidding. But at the county level, they don't take off your projects, even if they don't think they're priorities. They will approve those. They may just say that it's a low priority for them as a county, but we make sure that they approve, you know, what the city and town projects are. Let's see what else. The fourth area is technical assistance and incentives. You may have heard of enterprise zone tax credits. We administer that program for the region. Opportunity zones, which is right now just the Ute Mountain Ute tribal area is an opportunity zone. All of Montezuma County is an enterprise zone. So we try to make businesses aware of those state and federal incentives. And then we also try to work with basically, Montezuma County does not have a county level economic development group. So if we get business prospects or folks needing resources, we will work with them. So we will refer businesses to the SBDC if they need help with financing or financial statements or marketing. SCAPE, the accelerator program, is under our umbrella. So businesses that are trying to launch a unique product or service that would have a national interest, we work with them. We worked with the timber industry quite a bit this year. As you know, that's really growing. So we helped Ironwood come into the area. They got their road impact fees waived. We just try to help them be aware of incentives. And then also with revitalizing Western Excelsior would be another example. And then we've been able to provide some very small business loans to some of the contractors that work in the timber industry, the truckers and the loggers. And so we've been able to really help that industry start to grow. We also try to serve on a variety of boards to keep tabs on how different sectors are doing. So for example, we're on the Southwest Colorado Community College Board, and then also the Southwest Workforce Board. So, you know, we try to help where we can and just sort of always assess the environment, I guess, in terms of what we might need to step in and how we can help support. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, I do want to mention that with COVID and recovery, we will be receiving 2 recovery grants that we are able to help with recovery efforts throughout the region. In particular, we have money that we can help the chambers with their economic recovery task force that they're kind of leading. And they have the Tri-County newsletter that is not just for chamber members, but supposed to be for businesses countywide. And so we'll be able to provide them a little bit of money, because as memberships decline, we want these business support organizations to be solvent now more than ever. So that's one way we're helping moving forward. And the last thing I want to mention is every year we do a performance report for each of our counties. So at the end of 2020, we'll do a report that breaks down how many data inquiries we had in Cortez, how many grant resources and referrals that we did. We do grant research as another technical assistance component. How many loan inquiries we got or business referrals. And so all of that is compiled and we present that to our governments to try to show our value and worth to you. Last year, just as an example, in our 2019 report, we have 13 loans that are for City of Cortez businesses in the city limits, and 2 loans paid off. We also had 128 businesses that claimed enterprise zone tax credits, saving them almost $800,000. And so those are a couple numbers that we can share with you. And then one other piece that we do with enterprise zone is we can designate enterprise zone projects. If there's a nonprofit that is approving the economy and the distress of the area, you know, trying to improve economic conditions, they can get approved. So if you make a donation to them, you get a tax credit personally. And some of the projects that have been approved in Montezuma include the Bridge Emergency Shelter, Hospice, Habitat, Southwest Memorial Hospital Foundation, Montezuma Food Systems, and Share House. So those are ways that we're also able to help those organizations be stronger moving forward. So I will stop talking. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Laura, I've got a question. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, this is Rachel, by the way. What is the difference then between the enterprise zone and an opportunity zone?
The enterprise zone is state designated. So the state, after every census, will look at things like unemployment, outmigration, and other factors and say that this area is distressed. So they look at you at a county level. And if you meet that criteria, the whole county becomes an enterprise zone. And that is the case with Montezuma. If you don't meet it at a county level, like La Plata, then they look at each individual census tract. So if you look at La Plata, and those maps are available on our website, and I'm happy to send you anything, they looked at each individual census tract to see if they were eligible. And then businesses in those areas are eligible for up to 10 different credits just because they're doing business in these distressed areas and they want to support that business being successful. And that includes new employee credits, investment in their business credits, things like that. The opportunity zone is federal, and that was done with the 2017 Tax Reform Act. They looked at They basically looked by state and they allowed the state to pick enterprise zones, but it had to be 25% of eligible areas. I might have that slightly wrong, but basically what our state did, and I actually think it was a great idea, is they said, these are all of the eligible areas based on the numbers, you know, and they gave you a map with all the counties or the different census tracts. And they said, we want to make sure we have at least one per county, because the Front Range, you know, they have all these census tracts because there's a higher population. So we could have done all enterprise zone in the urban area. And they said, no, we're going to have at least one per county. So that's why our only eligible area was the Ute Mountain Tribe. And that only works for people that invest their capital gains. So if I sell Starbucks and I put that billions and billions of dollars into Montezuma County development projects, then I get all my capital gains basically erased. It doesn't really help folks that don't have capital gains or that don't invest in an opportunity zone area. The intent was to get all the big money into rural areas, and I don't necessarily think it's been that successful.
Okay.
My opinion.
I guess I have another question. What's the typical interest on the loans that you guys give out? I don't know if you already mentioned that.
So we do prime, Wall Street prime, which right now it was 3.25%. It might be going down. So banks usually tack on up to 2 percentage points above prime. So that's what we do. If it's a really risky loan, like they don't pay anybody, we may go 3 points, and we will go as low as prime. We are getting new money for COVID where we don't have to charge we don't have any interest requirements, but we're going to be really careful because our idea is we're not trying to undercut banks, because, you know, that's not really the purpose. It's for businesses that can't get bank financing. So we're just working with that. So I would say right now it would be between, 3 and 5%, which isn't bad. We're not a predatory lender by any means. And we've actually refinanced a lot of loans where people come in and they had 18%, things like that. We will refinance those because that's no way for a business to be successful.
Thank you so much, Laura. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your presentation. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by Miriam from Southwest Colorado Council of Governments. Welcome, Miriam.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. And I am the government official, also known as Miriam. My last name is complicated and long. So I did not get anything into your board packet because I was busy writing a grant. Can I share my screen and give you a short, amazing PowerPoint presentation?
Please do.
All right. Let me get it teed up. Thank you for having me this evening, and it's nice to see everybody, even if we're a ways away. All right, can everybody see that?
I can, yes.
Perfect. So I'm the executive director of the Southwest Colorado Council of Governments, also known as the COG, because also like my last name, I have a very long title and acronym. We are the sister organization of Region 9. So we have the exact same footprint and over the 5 counties, 10 municipalities, and 2 tribes. We have some different goals to Region 9, and that's why we're separate organizations. These are really big, lofty goals. They're kind of nebulous, if you will. So there's a lot of things that we get to do that we can put into those various categories. Aging, environment, housing, telecommunications, tourism, which could be economic development, and transportation. So if the COG board has an idea or a project they want to work on, it's relatively easy to find a home for that project. So this is the best way to describe the cog, is one kind of very large Venn diagram between, and we're the nexus of all those different programs. So how does broadband and telecommunication and transportation fit together? Or how about housing and aging and transportation? Those types of things is where the cog overlaps and what we do work on the best. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of the major programs that we do, because we could be here all evening talking in depth about the nuances. It's complicated because we have so many different programs and projects that we work on and a variety of funding sources. So the COG has been working on broadband since its inception in 2010. We're a relatively young organization. And that started with the Southwest Colorado Access Network, or SCAN. From that, the city of Cortez was able to expand its fiber network at the time. And again, this was 2010 through 2014. I believe the city of Cortez received about $800,000 from that grant. It was a state grant that was matched with local funding for a total of a little over $4 million to the entire region. And that, again, created a broadband network in the communities that did not have it, or in the case of Cortez, where it augmented the existing network. We do a lot of regional broadband planning. We have a regional broadband plan that looks at how to create middle mile infrastructure to serve the communities where we don't have middle mile infrastructure in a lot of places. For example, there is not fiber that runs wholly between Durango and Cortez, or Cortez and basically anywhere else. Cortez to Dove Creek is kind of spotty. It doesn't go past Dove Creek, and it doesn't go south at all right now. We also have put together a regional broadband plan to look at that redundancy that I just highlighted we're lacking. And that is what we call the Southern Route Engineering Plan, and that goes through New Mexico. So we go from Cortez, Toyac down to Shiprock on 491, to Farmington, Aztec, and back up into the La Plata County area on 550. And that will create a nice redundant route south, because most of our internet comes from the south or from the north. We are also working on helping the ISPs, the internet service providers, invest in those opportunity zones and enterprise zones that Laura spoke about, so they can get some tax funding and we can get some much needed connectivity to those areas. We're working on developing some redundancy for the town of Silverton with a new electric line that's going in. We're also working with a private company and CDOT and an electric co-op to try to get across Wolf Creek Pass. You can imagine that that's going to it's a big heavy lift to get across Wolf Creek. And then recently, we just submitted a grant with the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe to start that Southern Route plan that I just spoke about, to start building that. And that number has changed slightly, as it tends to do sometimes with grants. It's around $6.5 million now, because we had to do some estimation. We had to change some estimations, but that's still $6.5 million of fiber that will go from the city of Cortez to Toyac, and then down south to the intersections of Highway 160 and 491. And the reason we're going there is because there is a large broadband infrastructure project that's coming in from Phoenix through the Navajo Nation to Taos Pass and Shiprock, Aztec, Farmington, Durango, Wolf Creek, over to Denver on 285. So this will get us prepared as a region to have redundancy down to Phoenix on that private line. So that's why that's an important route. And it'll really support the city of Cortez with more affordable connectivity options, better investment for the ISPs, because they'll be able to invest in the community for an affordable price, because they can get their internet for cheaper to give that to the citizens and residents. And it'll help the city of Cortez's operations as well. So we talk a little bit about broadband. My friends like to joke that they will count how many times I say broadband with a clicker. So we also do a lot with transportation and transit. We support the Southwest Transportation Planning Region, which is also known as the TPR. And that is an organization of people who are interested in transportation and elected officials who then helps CDOT identify the needs and then prioritize how to spend money in this region. Your own employee, Phil, is the chair of the Transportation Planning Region right now, and he's doing a phenomenal job at it. But it does really help coordinate with CDOT and our local folks to make sure that the projects that are needed are actually getting done, and that we work very closely together with our state transportation. We also support the Regional Transit Council, which is an organization, not really an organization, it's a group that brings our health and human service providers and our transit providers, such as MoCo or our senior services, together to talk about how best to move people around who may not have passenger vehicles. We also work closely with CDOT, who runs the Bustang as it goes through town. We have some funding right now for transit coordination to help make sure that those discussions happen, but ensure that our transit providers are maybe working together as efficiently as possible. And if we can move people back and forth across the region without having to duplicate services, then that's more efficient for everybody, saves some government funds, and gets people to and from doctor's appointments or hospitals or grocery shopping, or just to jobs. So we currently also have funding from CDOT to work on a CDL program, and that is in conjunction with some DOLA funding. And one of those things that we have identified over the years is the lack of that workforce development, but it also impacts our governments as well. A lot of our government employees have commercial driver's licenses and they need that training. So we're working with CDOT, DOLA, and the Pueblo Community College out in Mancos campus to put together a CDL program that is eligible for all of our government employees and our citizens to be able to get that training and certificates. And we have a funding request out right now for some software to be able to help our transit providers coordinate better and make those trips more efficient, among other things. And then we have a lot of other projects and programs that are not broadband or transit or transportation related, because they get tired of saying broadband, so we have to do some other things. One of the things we have taken on a lot of roles in lately is the fiscal administration for small entities or entities that don't really have a tax status. We have a grant right now that helps identify workforce diversification and some business support, and that's where that CDL program comes in. It's one of the things that we work very closely with Region 9 on. We do a lot of legislative engagement and advocacy in normal years. In non-normal years, we do that remotely. We have support and create shared services programs so we can then share software or other things such as like a Zoom account. And we also coordinate very closely with our regional partners, Region 9, the other economic development groups, our chambers, the tribes, pick a thing, we probably work with them. We currently have some funding right now to do a regional housing study about the quality and quantity of different types of housing available. And we have worked on recycling initiatives over the years as well. So I want to highlight some of the fiscal administration that we do. Right now, we are the fiscal agents or fiscal management and administration for the San Juan Resource Conservation and Development Council, which is one of the oldest nonprofits in the region. It was formed in 1962 by a USDA grant to help support conservation and resource development in the Southwest Colorado area. Their footprint is different and or bigger, whatever they'd like it to be. We also do fiscal administration for the Regional Housing Alliance of La Plata County, the All Hazards team, which is headed up by Lori Johnson of the City of Cortez Police Department. That does the Homeland Security funding for the region. Mostly we buy a lot of radios and towers and things like that. We also provide fiscal support for the Southwest Incident Management Team, which gets called out during emergencies such as the Boulder floods or the most recent fire at the county line this year. And then we also provide fiscal administration for a lot of funding that comes through this region. Two of the current grants we have right now are for local foods planning. And we just finished up the DOLA census grant that brought in about $73,000 into the region and close to $20,000 for the Montezuma County Complete Count Committee, which is why you all are in such good shape with the complete counts in the census. So that's my presentation. There's my contact information. I'll leave that up for just a little bit, but I'd love to answer questions, explain a little bit more what we do, any of those types of things. Did anybody count how many times I said broadband?
27.
Perfect. So that's the Southwest Cog in a very small nutshell.
Thank you so much, Miriam. We appreciate your presentation. Look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a lovely evening and a great council meeting.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Bye. The next item on the agenda is introduction to Municipal Judge James A. Shaner. Good evening, Judge. Thank you for being here. If you can unmute yourself, we can hear you. Just click on that microphone icon.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Good evening, Judge.
Okay. Good evening. So I'm not exactly sure. I don't have a presentation for you. I think the purpose was basically to meet each other, if I'm guessing right.
All right, yeah.
If you want to know anything about municipal court, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
How often does the court convene?
It's every Monday morning. Sometimes we meet briefly on Wednesdays and sometimes briefly on Fridays, because when we have in custodies in jail, the law says they can't be held more than 48 hours without a bond hearing. So that's what we have on Wednesdays and Fridays, if we have it at all.
Okay.
So it's a sure thing every Monday morning, and then we wait to see what happens for Wednesdays and Fridays.
And is all this conducted virtually on Zoom type operations?
No, we do it in the courtroom. Currently, our setup is myself, the city attorney, the defense attorneys are all in the courtroom along with the court clerk. A defendant will show up outside the building on the west side. They are led into an anteroom, and there's a camera set up there, a podium. And so they're not coming into the courtroom itself, but everybody can hear each other, see each other, and that's how we do business.
What are your typical cases, if that's the right word?
Well, I'm not sure we have typical cases. They all relate to violations of the city code. The more numerous cases seem to be alcohol cases in the park and shoplifting at various stores in town.
I have a question, Judge. How long have you been our judge, our municipal judge? How many years?
Well, I think I started in 2008.
Okay.
So it's been a while. So.
All right. Okay, council, any more questions?
I'm also the municipal court.
Yeah, I don't have any.
Okay. Well, thank you much, Judge. We appreciate your introducing yourself, and it's good to see you again, sir.
Okay, good to see you all.
Okay.
Hopefully I won't see you in the courtroom.
Okay, hopefully not. Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, the next
good
item
evening.
on the agenda is the monthly finance update with the budget impacts of COVID-19, and Ben Burkett will be presenting.
Good evening, everyone.
Ben.
Good to, yep, good evening. It's good to see you all, albeit virtually. Always nice to have a chat with you all. I do want to, since we have a little extra time, doesn't mean we're going to use it all up, but I really want to encourage you all to ask questions if you have them. I think there's one thing I also want to make sure we addressed is an audit update, building off of the an email I believe we all have received a couple of weeks ago, which a response was done, just to, if there's any questions related on that front. But first, if you don't mind, I will share my screen here, and I will pull over my, just so we're all looking at the same thing on the same page here. What we're looking at here is the COVID update, the monthly update that I've been doing every month for you all. And I think what we're just going to talk about briefly here is the sales tax collections projections, which is where we stand at for the month of July. And then below that, we'll go through the lodger's tax. So quickly, just looking at the sales taxes, the numbers have come in much stronger than I believe any of us have anticipated. The number that you see here is 1.187 million is what we collected. That was a timing, based off of timing. I believe the revised number that I saw that's come in, that came in yesterday or today, this morning, was about $1.2 million. So it's nice to see that strength in our sales tax collections. It does help offset some of those other revenue areas that have been negatively impacted by COVID. For example, the program revenues from the recreation center, as well as some of the, trying to remember a couple of other items. We'll get into those details here in a few minutes when we go through the general fund updates as well. So that's a really positive item there. However, I do have some concern. I've discussed it with John, and he has the same concern. Is there's still a lot of variability in the response to COVID at the federal level. As we all know, I think most of us were expecting some sort of extension of stimulus. However, as we all know, that those talks have subsided at this point. If they come back to the table, we don't know. So it's just a little trepidation on that front, and something to be concerned or just to be aware of. Now, on the opposite side, when we look at our lodger's tax continues to take a major hit, a beating. I think what we're finding is we are busy. We do have a lot of tourists, but they're not really staying at the lodgers. I think it's more RVs in nature. The last month at the Region 9 meeting, board meeting that we had other municipalities invited and attending that meeting. So we had, I think, Pagosa, Mancos, Dolores, and Silverton. And what they had all said was they are seeing similarities to what we're seeing in our sales tax, but also our lodger's tax, where everybody's busy, but it is RVers. So it just kind of validates what we are seeing locally here in Cortez, but really throughout the region. The points that we have just down below here is sales tax. Continue watching. It's coming in strong. We're doing well. We'll continue to keep you all apprised of where we go from there. But luckily, the last 2 months are providing us a cushion, so to speak, if we do take a little hit towards the end of as we progress through the remainder of the year. Lodger's tax, again, it is dramatically down from what was budgeted. And if you remember in the last budget meeting, we discussed, lack of a better word, freezing further payments to Mesa Verde Country. And as I mentioned last month, we had discussed all that with Mesa Verde Country, and they were on board, and they were very helpful in working with us through that. And one of the promises I made, I believe, to you all and to Mesa Verde Country was, as we continue to progress through the year, if we see any, if the revenues start coming in higher and we can have an opportunity to pass on those funds that otherwise would have gone to Mesa Verde Country, we will. And of course, we will make you all aware and apprised of those actions before doing. So on the COVID side, are there any questions or comments?
Ben, I have a question about lodger's tax. This is Rachel.
You bet.
Do we collect lodger's tax from rental, like vacation rental properties that are on, say, Airbnb or VRBO or whatever website?
Yes, we do. It's a mixed bag. If you really want to go into detail on how and what we're doing, I'm very happy to present that to you. We're supposed to collect both lodgers and sales tax for short-term rentals, like Airbnbs, VRBOs, right? Airbnb, we have an agreement with Airbnb that they are to collect and remit sales taxes. But what I found is with other, let's see, businesses like VRBO, or there's plenty of other ones that exist out there, we don't have an agreement. And in those cases, it's required by those, by the individuals who are renting out their properties. They are required to submit the taxes, to collect and submit it is upon those individuals to collect and remit those taxes to the city. It is not on, let's say, VRBO to do that. Having learned a lot of this last year, I did look at some software that's an add-on to what we have, MuniRevs, which is our sales tax collection tool, to determine whether it's, which would help us be more proactive in going after and identifying individuals who may not be collecting or remitting. I did some analysis on that, and at that point, it didn't make sense for what it would cost us versus what we might be missing in sales tax. It would have been a loss, so to speak. I'm happy to go in more discussion with that and get your guidance if you really want to go down a path of such.
Okay, I'd say it maybe at a later time.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that at any point in time.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
You bet. Any other questions on this area before I move on? Okay, and so now we will move up onto our financial report for the month. And I have some notes off to the side here, so I apologize if I'm not looking directly in the camera. So our cash and investments, we're still holding strong here with those. They're growing slightly, which again tells me and it's a cash basis. It's more of an indicator, if you want to call it as such, of how our money's in versus money's out, right? Revenues versus expenses are coming in, and there's more money coming in, which allows us to build up the cash that we have and the investments that we have in the bank. Of course, that's all timing based as well. So that's why I say it's an indicator that we're able to cover our expenses. As we move on to the general fund, some notes here that I'll talk about are, we are looking healthy from our net change in position, all right, or our fund balance, so to speak. If you compare it this time last year to this year to this time last year, we are in the positive. So this year, we're 873 cumulative, whereas last year it was we were in a deficit of 118,000. What that tells me, so that's about a variance of about $990,000 or $1 million. Okay, what that tells me is two things. One is the balanced budget that we did last year was reduction expenses that we were expecting. But additionally, is if you remember, John brought to council back in April a reduction in budgets due to COVID response. So that way we can minimize the impact on the city and the services and our employees. So we wouldn't have to furlough individuals or whatnot. And council approved those savings. And that was about $900,000 of savings. And this is showing that our department heads are managing the budgets and reducing the expenses. Again, it also is showing that our revenues here that you see are coming in strong, as we just discussed, okay? We do have a couple other items that are down. For example, our recreation program revenues, they're down about 80K. Our license and permits are down about 20K. There's some more details. I'm going to kind of gloss over some of these, but if you would like to go into them, I'm happy to stop and go back. Here's the revenues that we're just kind of comparing month over month from last year. The line is last year's to give you an idea of the trends that we see. From the expenditure standpoint, I'm just looking at the graph. Here's a good example to show you that, again, the line that you see is last year's numbers, disbursements. The bars are this year's what we're doing today, broken out by department. And we're under what was last year for the reasons we discussed. You know, we can break it down in some of the reasons why expenditures are lower is the discretionary and capital expenditures are down about 150K from what was expected. We are seeing some, reductions in operating expenses by various departments, personnel expenses reductions. You know, for example, library department, they went without a department head for part of the year. Same thing for the police department. So we're seeing some of those, and then the other reductions from people, the departments following through with the reduction expenditures that was proposed back to council. Any questions on the general fund before I move on?
No, I don't have any.
Thanks, Orly.
I guess, sorry, intergovernmental expense actuals, it says 0.
Right, thank you. So yes, the intergovernmental expense is what is historically what's been done, and we're not changing it yet, but I would like to, is the charges that we do in within ourselves with the shared service funds. For example, the technology, the shop fund, okay? Those expenses get transacted one time a year, which is July. And as you look at this screen here in front of you on page 11, there's this large jump, right? That large jump will be the intergovernmental expense that we did code in last July. So next month we should see, you will see a bar that shows our expenditures going up. And of course that will impact the fund balance as well.
Okay, so that's something we should always expect in July.
Right now, ideally, what I would like to do is get to a point where the expenses are done monthly. So what you see is more of a flat line here. And I personally, one reason why I would like to do that is because I believe that'll be easier for you all to understand a better idea of what the trends are from an expenditure standpoint, right? You can, rather than just knowing, all right, this 1 month is going to jump. Why? You know, you get a better understanding what the expenses are and how they're following any trends or seasonality that may incur. When we make that change, we'll let you know. And of course, I need to discuss that further with John to make sure he's in agreement and on board. But a good question. So next month you will see that large hit. Revenues, here's just from the general fund, the sales tax, giving you an idea. Again, the light blue line is 2019's, the dark blue line is this year, how we're looking. I apologize, the July month is not in here, but July will be quite a bit higher for sales tax than what you see here. So I'll just give you that positive. And then down below here we have is a marijuana. As you can see marijuana is outperforming consistently month over month prior year's marijuana tax collections. Okay, and now onto the street improvement fund. Again, it's a positive here. At the end of the day, what you're really seeing is we have about $1 million for capital outlay, but we have not spent we haven't really been spending on that capital outlay yet. You can see there's 194K that's kind of been done. So I anticipate the streets with Phil having some projects, well, probably hitting some more expenses here from July through the construction season. All right, and now the Recreation Center Fund. Again, you're seeing a positive. It's building up the fund balance, so to speak, here at 335 aggregate for the year so far. And the rec center needs to build up that fund balance because in about October there is a let's just say round it $600,000 loan payment that goes back to the bondholders. So by October, for the year, you want to make sure you're able to cover that large payment on top of the operational expenses. So the rec center is on that path to be able to cover that. Additionally, what we'll see is to further help that building of that fund balance is the revenues. There will be about a $200K revenues of the coming out of the general fund to the rec center for paying off the city hall loan, or a payment on the city hall loan. So there, the rec center has a little help on that front.
Ben?
And yep.
What happens if you don't get there to the bond payment?
We would need to bring that to council, okay? And John, please step in if you have other thoughts. But we would have a deficit at the end of the day, okay? Because my suggestion is, just like you have your own loans, you don't want to skip on a payment on a loan, right?
Right.
And nor would I suggest that for the city. We would not skip on a loan. So we'd want to make good on that loan payment. The rec center may then have a deficit. Question is that okay? And it may be just fine, because if you remember, there's the fund balance that comes from prior years that gets rolled, right, as it grows. As we have shared with you all, by not having our audits, we don't know exactly what the fund balance is, right? But I know there's a fund balance. I just can't tell you exactly what it is. So if there may be a deficit, let's say it's a $100,000 deficit for discussion's sake, is you can say, we're going to do nothing about it. Or you can say, okay, we need to transfer money over to subsidize the rec center. Okay, where's that money come from? All right, does it come from the general fund? Probably. All right, now in the general fund, well, how does that impact the general fund negatively? What cannot get done now, right? So there's options there. It's a good question. Right now, I'm not concerned about that being an issue.
Good.
Especially if our sales tax continue to be strong.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on the rec center before I move on?
How much longer are we paying off that debt?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I believe next year's the last year.
Okay.
Yeah. Now with
Awesome.
that, something to be aware of, at the same time, the following year, the sales tax collections tax rate goes down. So right now, the tax rate is 0.55%. It'll go down in 2022 to 0.35. So yes, there's a decrease in disbursements or expenditures, but there's also a decrease in revenues. And we'll, when we have our budget meeting next week, we'll be able to start showing you that as well. And then just so we're on the revenue page for the rec center, this increase revenues in October, that's in essence that $200,000 payment that comes out of the general fund to the rec center fund for the loan of City Hall. All right, now on the equipment fund. The equipment fund again is typically for purchasing vehicles and other equipment for use in the city. The equipment fund has not spent any capital outlay, as that was one of the discretionary expenses that was put on hold back in April with council's approval. So that's why we're seeing, revenues coming in, because the revenues are coming from sales tax. They get a portion of sales tax, but the expenditures are little. Or sorry, I'll try to. There you go. Is that better? So as you can see, but at this rate, all we're going to do is just continue building up the fund balance within the equipment fund. So that's maybe a discussion if you all are interested in saying, you know what, let's go ahead and do some capital spend with equipment, or to let it go ahead and build up.
Can it be carried over to next year?
Oh yes, whatever's not spent will get put into, it stays within the equipment fund balance. It'll just be your beginning fund balance for next year. So you don't lose it if that's a concern. And really that's all the different funds. And of course I have all these different graphs and more detail for you. As always, I'm open to suggestions if you would like to see the information presented differently, or new information that I'm not providing. I'm happy to work with any of you to revise that. So any questions at this point on this part before we move on to financial audit update?
Good job so far.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So financial audit update. Let me stop sharing my screen here. I think I just messed it all up.
Nice try.
My screen just disappeared. Here we go. There we go. I'm not sharing anymore. Right? Okay. So financial audit update. We are in the process of drafting our 2016 financial statements. The financial auditors and ourselves, we agree on our 2016 financial numbers. That's unless something changes, but we agree. That's the first time in 4 years. Every line item, every account we have, we agree on them. There is one additional item that we have to do on our side. And what that is we do need to calculate excess Tabor revenues. And if there are any excess Tabor revenues, we need to make one more journal entry to be accounted for. Now, Tabor is pretty complex, and it's interesting how it all works. And so I'm happy to go in more detail about it later if you would all like to. It is so complex, though, at times that you really need to have Tabor lawyers is what I'm finding, okay? And if you all were following last year, we did have some questions around Tabor and how it was calculated and what the city was doing with Tabor. And in the past, historically, it was Tabor was incorrectly calculated. And one of those items is you have to calculate revenues, okay? So you take all your sales tax revenues, all your grants, and then you have to say, here's what's allowed by like a Tabor ceiling, okay? It's a Tabor calculation. Say, here's how much you're allowed to bring in, because otherwise you're growing the government the theory is you're growing government too fast. You then determine here's what you actually brought in. And this gap here that I'm showing, that would be considered excess. That excess then has to be put into, for us, it has to be put into a capital improvement fund, okay? And then that's used to fund capital projects. That was not done prior to 2016. It's something that myself and our consultant and the auditors are working through to get that capital improvement fund created and working, okay? So we have to do that, some tweaks on that still. The auditor then needs to go finish drafting the financials for 16, and then we need to work on our end on going back and forth. And that'll take some time. I am pushing the auditor hard to get moving. The auditor is a bottleneck. I'm going to be very frank, okay? They have their normal business, their normal clientele that they are working through, and their normal audit dates. And we just passed an audit date of 7/31. There's another audit date of 9/30, depending on what type of governmental entity you are, a school, other municipal governments, local governments, whatever they are. So he's working through a lot of those. One of the questions that came up is, can we speed things up by getting a new contractor? Because that individual is a bottleneck at times. Can we get a new auditor, because they're a bottleneck, to speed everything up? The answer is yes. We can do whatever we'd like, okay? We have to understand what the impact is. For 16 and 17, we have already incurred expenses, both on the contractor side and the auditor side. So if we wanted to find a new contractor and a new auditor, we would have to go through an RFP process, which can take, let's say, on 2 to 4 months. We then have to work with both those organizations to determine whether they want to start from scratch or whether they want to rely on what was already done. Most likely an auditor would say we need to start from scratch because they're not going to trust what a previous auditor would do. So in which case, what that means is you're going to incur you're going to duplicate costs, right? Because we already paid our current auditor, we already have them involved. We got to pay them what work they've done, even though we haven't finished all of it. The auditor then will need to take time to get through their audit process, as would then the contractor to go through the cleanup process. They'll have to say, do they want to just start with what's been done, or they want to start over? If they want to start over, we're going to incur duplicate costs again, as well as take time. So if you say, hey, this a new contractor comes in, they want to take another 80 hours to do work, you know, excuse me, not 80, but let's say it's a month worth of work, because it's not a small task, and they're able to focus on it. That's month delay still and duplicate costs. The auditor would come in behind them and say, okay, an average audit for an hours for an organization our size is about 180 hours, and it's about $25,000 to $30,000 typically is what it is. Okay, so you're adding costs, adding time and costs by going to a new organization. Doesn't mean we can't, but you add cost and time. Time for getting an RFP, time for getting a contractor up to speed and doing the work, time for an auditor to get up to speed and do their work. So by that time, you're talking maybe 6 months, okay? I did some rough calculations, and you'd have to rely on an RFP to get a real calculation of cost of what an estimate might be to change auditors, okay? And a consultant. But my initial cost just for I'm just looking at 2016 alone, would be, right now, we are contracted for about $35,000 right now, okay? That's for the audit engagement. And then the other bit is for the professional services. The expedited path for bringing someone on, and you're going to probably have higher rates because they want to do work. You want them to focus on you solely, so they're going to charge you a premium. And so that cost, roughly, I'm looking at, again, this just based off of assumptions, is maybe about $88,000 for just 2016 alone, okay? Versus our $35,000 that we're looking at right now, okay? And that's basically what you're paying. That difference of about $50,000 is a premium to expedite and get someone here to focus solely on you and nothing but you, knowing it's still going to probably take 6 months of time to get them up and running and completing their work. So just things to keep in mind. And again, I'm not saying no, it's like, yes, we can approach this different ways, and I'm happy to discuss it. And it's the same number for 2017 as well, that how I'd look. It'd probably be about $88,000 by year, slowly coming down into 2019 to have everything expedited back to back. Something to also keep in mind from a professional services, a contractor or consultant who can come in and do what we're doing today with our books, is the challenge is finding an accountant who also knows Cassell. And that's the person we have today, and that's why we selected them. We could always find an accountant. I don't think that's an issue, but the challenge will be finding an accountant who knows Cassell. Last year, when I was still getting my feet wet, we brought in Cassell to try and help us clean up 16. And Cassell just did Cassell. They didn't really do the accounting. And what we found is in the last couple of months of doing the cleanup that we've been doing, some of that cleanup is actually from the work that Cassell did last year, unfortunately, because they didn't have the mindset of the accountant. They were only looking at it from Cassell, how it operates only. I'm going to pause. I'm sure there's questions abound.
So in speaking about trying to expedite this situation, is there an option if we keep this current accountant who knows Cassell and just make it so we are their only gig? Can we throw them a few $1,000 extra to make us their sole project to push this through faster?
So one of the things I've been talking with her about is the focus, right? And where my concern now is not on the name of the company is Professional Management Services. Okay, my concern is not really on her; it's more on the auditor. at this time. One of the challenges we had, and we would have this challenge with any consultant we go to, is we delayed on our side for multiple reasons, bringing her on, and she still had her regular book of pipeline of sales that was already in line, right? Because we took a little while to get into her book. So that was part of what our challenge was in getting her solely focused on us for this first half of the year. Now, the latter half of the year, because I've been working with her, is like, hey, look, I gotta have you focus on us. Can you focus on us? And the feeling that I get is yes, right? That's what I'm hearing from her, is that yes, she can focus on us. And her slower time is the fall season. If we went to any consultant to hire them on, that's partly why you have to pay the premium, right? To get them on and get here and focus on us. And it's a big premium. And that may be justified to pay that. Is we also have to understand where we're at in their pipeline and when they can get to us. They may already have an engagement or two that they have to wind up before they can even get started.
Okay.
Can we force a deadline on her, or?
Well, I'm going to clarify. So what deadline, whose deadline, what's your deadline? Is it the getting the audits done? Is it the cleanup done? Is it the financial report done? When you say deadline, what are you thinking?
I don't know.
And that's okay.
I feel like it's the audit. Like we're not able to get grants because we don't have our numbers. Like every day is money.
Yeah, and that's a absolutely valid comment, Councilwoman Huckins. If that's the case, let me reframe what I mean by that. Defining the deadline as the audit complete, let's just say 2016, just simplified discussion here, right? 2016 is said and done. The consultant is already, we're as far as we can get. We're waiting on the auditor at this point. Okay. We're going to go, and I'm trying to get her now to say, okay, now let's start going on 17 and start working on 17 while the auditor we're working through the audit financial reporting process of writing and drafting the financial statements. She'll start working on 17. And that'll take us a little while. But I think she's going to, like I said, I have belief, and this is where I absolutely understand you all holding us accountable and saying, okay, is she done? How's she going? Are we completing our work, or are we still behind? What's going on? Those questions are absolutely valid and fair. But like I said, though, I believe the actual next bottleneck, it's not going to be the consultant, it's going to be the auditor. So, I mean, you can place a deadline on anyone, right? Question is, can they fulfill it? Right now, the auditor is going to be the challenge. And I've been talking to the auditor basically daily over the last couple of weeks. And again, I don't want to I want to clarify, like, yes, you can change course. We can. You just have to understand where it's going to cost money, and it might cost time. And getting an auditor to speed will take more time than maybe what we may appreciate.
Ben, can you hear me? This is.
Yeah.
You say that after 2016, that bottlenecking will maybe subside or be less, or would you even be able to guess at something like that?
Frankly, I believe it's going to continue. We'll continue to be challenged. The goal that I believe that is reasonable is this year we get 16 and 17 complete. And then next year we have 18, 19, 20 complete. I could potentially see 17 going into early next year, depending on where the auditor stands. And when I mean early, I mean being finalized and out the door.
Hey, Ben, can we circle back on this Cassell knowledge? So it sounds archaic. Would you say, I mean, obviously, okay, how should I say? So people aren't meeting in person for this, right? So we could cast the web far, right? Question mark?
Yeah, yeah, frankly, you can.
Okay.
There is some of the things that I'm asking the consultant to do is some of the foundational controls that we need and processes that we need to have. I'm having her look at it from the Cassell standpoint, because we've implemented controls as well, right? To prevent future fraud, to detect fraud. And it's not just that, it's also best practice, right? For any environment, to have a controls environment. There are some controls that I really want to have in Cassell. For example, a vendor list. We should be able to print out a vendor list, and I want to see what vendors were newly added and what vendors changed, right? So if someone is going in and changing an account number for a vendor, I want to know why, who did it. I want to know it was approved, so it was legit. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that within Cassell, and I've been asking. So I need people who can have that knowledge, right? So that's just a side knowledge. That's just a side component that I'm trying to have this consultant do, right? I'm trying to get as much value out of these consultants as we can get. That bang for the buck. Sorry to be cliche with that. And that's where the benefit of having someone come on site at least once or twice is beneficial. Tried to have them, Lorraine is her name, from Professional Management Solutions, come on site back in January. But at that time, we were asked to withhold travel, and it wasn't approved. So she wasn't able to travel for that. Yes, we can go far and wide with it. Cassell is not archaic, just so you're aware. Cassell is, it is becoming an industry standard, I think, for municipalities our size and even maybe bigger. Okay, they just exploded, and that was part of the problem. What happened when we did our conversion, Cassell was growing too quick, too fast, and so the implementation was just like slam, get it out, don't ask questions, and just kind of walk away. They recognized some of those issues after talking to them when I went and talked with them last year. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling now, so I'll stop. Did I answer your question, Amy?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you shined a light on the Cassell thing, because that's a totally new
maybe
thing to
a
me.
little aspect is the system we came off of. That was a legacy, archaic system. Okay, Cassell was so new and following new processes, and the way it processed transactions was so different from how the AS400 legacy system was. We didn't take the time to bother to understand how that worked. That's part of the reason why we're in the predicament we are. So we tried to do transactions in Cassell the same way we did in the AS400 system, but that's not how it works. They operate differently.
Ben, like your department would benefit from more Cassell training then?
Yeah, so one of the first things I did last year was I actually myself went to Cassell and trained up to get some base knowledge, so I'm not messing things up, or at least know where to stop and ask questions. At the same time, I started having my team do micro trainings with Cassell, and this is where Cassell has been, their support has been phenomenal, to be frank. They just started doing 1 hour trainings with my team at that time. And we did that for probably 4 months. I do want to do more training. And every year there is a Cassell conference, which has a lot of user training and of new functionality that they perform, and they train on that new functionality. This year with COVID, would have been the first year we would have attended that, because I don't think my team has been pushed to do trainings where I'm asking them to and almost also expecting it. I don't know how it's going to go this year, though. I don't expect much of a conference.
I know that we could probably go on with this for days,
Yes.
and maybe we will have another discussion in the future, but I also think it would be good if we're respectful of the time we have for our guests. But that's just my suggestion. What do you think, Mayor? Can you hear me?
Mayor, I think it's up to you.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate your presentation. Are there any other questions?
I guess I just have one more. I'm stuck on this because I think it's a thing that we are definitely stuck on. So you are a point person, Ben. In your educated and, you know, in your opinion, is it stick with Lorraine, stick with what we've got going, or cast the web?
My thoughts. We stay the course. I'm open. I would say we stay the course with our contractor or consultant. The auditor, I would be open with looking maybe for an auditor for 2018. We are contracted with them, so we would have to break a contract. They're agreeable. I'm open to that, but at the same time, I'm also hesitant. I know we talk about we're missing out on grant monies, right? And that's a major concern. Another perspective to that is any grant monies you go for, you have to match. Okay. Frankly, it was hard enough to balance the budget for 2020. It's a challenge this year, as you'll see next week. And then you'll also see 2021 and 2022 budgets are drafted and proposed with a deficit. So even if we wanted to go for grants, I believe we would have a challenge to match those grants.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you again, Ben. Appreciate it. We're running a little bit late. We're going to have a discussion with the city attorney, Mike Green, on explanation of memos. Mike?
Yes, sir. I write a variety of memos for a variety of reasons. And there's the memos I write you folks for city council meetings with recommendations for motions and things like that. And those would require some sort of action. They may be a collection of information gathered from staff, outside sources, or whatever. As your attorney, I also write you memos about, and this is, I hate to say it this way, but something relatively new, litigation. In the past several years, we've had more litigation involving city employees, city contracts. Right now, there's 2 bankruptcies that I've been sending you information on one of. The other one is the Hertz Rental Car Company, which we haven't gotten any information from them. But they're our franchise rental car company at the airport. But they're not doing anything. Those are more informational and wouldn't require necessary action at the time you get the memo or in the near future. Somebody asked that question, and I'm going to try and put in the memos, action not required, informational only, or why. And that was a good point. There's another set of memos I write or send you occasionally with articles or things from them. Because, say, the land use code, I remember there was some differing opinions about I just call it the American dream of a single family home for everybody with X number of acres and whatever. And nationally, certain cities you will see are starting to get rid of single family homes and go to multi-family units and things like that. So I might send you something like that for you to just have for informational purposes, so you can ask staff questions. Do Do we need to change for this because we need housing? Do we need to change how we do business because we have homeless people? In other words, these are things you might use for your discussion. Everything I send you is got a privileged document type warning on it or a label. You don't have to share this with anybody if they want it. Maybe a court subpoena, but it's not subject to query. It's privileged material. It's attorney-client. That little tag goes on almost everything I write, simply because we've had some mistakes where some of my advice to staff and or council got inadvertently passed on to the other side. And once they see it, they can send it back and they can say they're never going to use it, but they've seen it. So we're trying to make sure that most attorney-client stuff doesn't go out. If you have a particular way you would like these memos to come, or a format or some other way, I'm open to suggestions. There's a large change here in the number of people and how they do business with council. There's 4 new people, so maybe you want it a different way. That's fine, or all of you want it a different way. Please let me know, and we'll work to improve. As always, if you have questions about a memo, sometimes just call the office, speak to Julie. Sometimes she's got the answer. I will try and get back to you as quickly as possible. Sometimes I don't want to put something on an email because of my experience of it having been given out to the other side in litigation. So I'm a little nervous about talking about certain topics that might come up in the future that we didn't really need other people to see, quite honestly, because I was giving you advice. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know.
Thank you, Mike. I want to add that if any of the council members have any questions on these memos, just give Mike a call. He's very easy to get a hold of. Just contact the secretary or himself, and he gets right back to you. So I'd encourage you to do that. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that information. Our next presenter is Haley Leonard. Update on Access Health request for funding. Good evening, Haley. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for having me. You guys are pretty much on time, which is great. I just want to introduce Brian Ensign. He's the other person that doesn't look like me listed as Haley Leonard. Brian Ensign is a licensed clinical social worker and licensed addiction counselor, and he also oversees the acute treatment unit, crisis services, and our detox facility. And Brian's been with us over 8 years. So I wanted to make sure that you had a real clinician, not just me, answering any clinical questions that you have regarding the ATU. And I just want to start off by saying, since the last time we talked, the request has changed. So I'll be getting an updated letter to you all, but we are withdrawing our request for detox funding, and we will just be requesting the $12,000 for the acute treatment unit for 2021. Montezuma County generously stepped forward and was able to help fund the outstanding amount that we needed and to support the hospital. So if you talk to them, give them a very big thank you. But we're excited that that process is moving forward. Do you guys have any questions about the detox component before I move on? No? Okay. So our request tonight is for the acute treatment unit, which is our inpatient psychiatric facility in Durango. The city of Cortez has supported, along with other local entities, the funding of the ATU for many, I think over 10 years now. The facility opened in 2006, and it is the only psychiatric stabilization unit in the region. So it's a really, really important resource for our community and the 5 communities that we serve here in Southwest Colorado. Some information pertinent to Montezuma County and Cortez specifically. I know you had questions about the utilization of the acute treatment unit. Last year in 2019, we served 59 Montezuma County residents, which accounts for 205 bed days. So that means people stayed about 3.5 days. This year to date, we've had 29 admissions, which is on par, even considering the pandemic. We've been open for business since the beginning of everything, and we haven't stopped accepting patients because it's a really important resource that we needed to keep open. Just to give you a little context, Montezuma County had 1,941 crisis assessments in 2019. And so the admissions to the ATU were about 3% of those total crisis assessments. So our team does a lot of work to make sure that we're keeping people at home. We utilize outpatient services and try to do everything that we can to prevent an admission to the ATU or even a higher level of care. So our goal is really to keep people home and keep people close to their family and their supports. Any questions so far about the ATU? No, not so far. So one of the reason that we're here tonight is we'd like to ask the City of Cortez to continue to support the local funding for the ATU with $12,000 for 2021, as I mentioned before. Local funding for the ATU is about 23% of the overall budget. So the City of Cortez is alongside Montezuma County, the town of Mancos, Dove Creek, Dolores County, Ignacio, City of Durango, La Plata County, Pagosa Springs, Archuleta County. I'm sure I'm forgetting one really important contributor, but we have a really, really strong group of municipalities that have contributed to funding the ATU for many, many years. So I'll stop there. Amy, you look like you have a question. No?
Actually, no, I just referred back to the July 14th notes I have, so I took care of it. Thanks, Haley.
Okay, perfect. And just, to put everything in perspective, Access serves in 2019, we served about 10,000 patients across the region. This year, we expect to be a little closer to 12,000. So inpatient psychiatric admissions are less than 3% of those. So you can see it is a really, really critical resource, but it is a smaller portion of the patients that we serve.
Thank you, Haley. Access is a very important institution in this community, and we really appreciate everything you folks are doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate all of your support. We definitely couldn't do what we do without the support of the municipalities, local law enforcement, hospital, and all of our really important community partners that support our patients too. And if you all don't have questions, I did just want to let you know, so there aren't any surprises. We are in discussions with Cortez Police Department, Montezuma County Sheriff's Office, Montezuma County, Dispatch, the Mancos Marshal's Office, and we'll be including Cortez Fire to look at some community policing options with all the discussion nationwide around, how can we help pull police from calls that they're not suited for, and how can we better serve clients? We've decided to start looking at different models from around the country that might be able to work for Montezuma County. So we are in the very, very early discussions with these agencies But with that said, we are planning within the next month or so to have a full proposal to bring back to council to let you know what we're up to, what we think will work for Montezuma County. And we're really hoping that we can come up with a plan that models. There's a program out of Eugene, Oregon called Cahoots, if you want to look into it, and one in Denver called the STAR program that dispatches a team to help with calls involving substance use and mental health, welfare checks, to resource for individuals experiencing homelessness and things of that nature. So we are looking at how we can all better serve Montezuma County and the city of Cortez. So that will be coming soon.
That's great, Haley. Those are really steps in the right direction. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited and we really appreciate all the work that law enforcement, fire, hospital has put into that as well.
Thank you. I applaud you as well, Haley.
Thank you.
Haley, this is Rachel. Are you taking public input on that as well?
We aren't quite to that stage yet. I will let you know. If you have input, please let me know. We've only had 2 meetings and we're really doing our research right now. So I will let you all know next steps and see what that looks like as we get a little bit closer. We're really just in the research and coming together phase.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Haley. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Brian got off easy. I was hoping you guys would have some brain busters for him. Please reach out if you all have any questions or let me know what next steps look like for the funding request.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is discussion on disposal of the airport fire truck. City Manager John Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. The fire truck at the airport has been decommissioned, not because it doesn't work or anything else. The FAA has just decided it's too old to be certified for any response at the airport. So Russ contacted me and said there's no point to keeping it because we can't use it. We really wouldn't want to take it out because of liability issues on any call we would have at the fire department. So Russ suggested that we declare it surplus and get rid of it. I contacted the local fire district and asked Chief Balfour if they perhaps would be interested in it. They did go out and check it out. The chief said his staff was like kids in a candy house. They just were thrilled with it. It put out good water. They could really use it for grass fires and other things. On the other hand, this money was purchased probably 2.5% with airport funds. And Russ would really like to get his money back. So frankly, I'm a little torn. I think that it's a good enough truck. It should be kept here and used locally. But on the other hand, I understand where Russ would like to get his money back. And since he is an enterprise fund, he doesn't get money from the general fund. And so I guess this is a call by council. And I see Russ is unmuting himself, so I assume he has something to say.
I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay.
You covered it well.
Russ, do you have any idea what the value of this fire truck would be if we put it up for bid?
Well, there's a truck from another department, another airport for sale in a state auction in another week or two. It's a rescue truck. It doesn't shoot water. It's not four-wheel drive. It's the exact same year, but it has a lot more miles on it. It's from a bigger airport where they had more incidences to roll on. And they were asking $10,000 for it because of the increased capabilities and lower wear and tear on our truck. I would think it would go for considerably more than that, but I don't have a number.
I
When do you guys
understand that, I think there's going to be a bad fire season this year, and it would be nice to keep that truck locally. It's definitely consideration. I also consider, you'd like to have that money back in the airport fund. So we're gonna have to think about this.
Hey, Russ, can you, sorry.
Any comments?
Russ, can you speak about the type of chemical? So when I went out and had the awesome tour of the airport with you, you spoke. We looked at that fire truck and sure is beautiful. But a side note on that is the chemical that's used as that to put out the fires. Can you tell everybody about that chemical and the changes
Right.
that have been made?
The truck is equipped with foam capability for putting out fuel fires. It lays a blanket over the fire and smothers it. Very good for fuel fire extinguishment, but it contains a chemical called PFAS, and that has been identified as a carcinogen, and it's being very highly promoted in the CDPHE right now. And they're coming up with regulations. There'll be a preliminary regulation in the latest webinar in October. Of course, then there's always a comment period for several months after that. So within the next, I would say 6 to 9 months, there'll be a regulation coming down about that PFAS, which is going to cause some unknown headaches until we actually have the regulation in front of us. So we also dodged that bullet.
The fire department well equipped with like fire trucks?
I couldn't hear that. Let me turn my volume up.
It's probably me. Sorry, Russ. Is our fire department well equipped? Do they even need this extra truck, or like where are we at right now?
I can't answer that. I can't speak on their behalf, but they were, as John already pointed out, quite happy with the performance. So I do think they'd be interested. I just don't know what they'd be willing to give in return.
I have a question for you, Russ. When you said you want your money back, what kind of money are you talking about?
There again, I don't have a price in mind. John mentioned 2.5%. I believe when this was purchased in '97, we were actually paying 10% at that time. And at that time, traditionally, the state would have our grant match. So we probably paid 5 cents on the dollar, and we paid $202,000 for that back then. So we're talking 10 grand would be a benchmark low point, but then you have to consider inflation and all that. So my original intent was, before John contacted the fire department, was to just put it out on the auction site that we use and see what comes.
Yeah, I would say the one that Rick Smith at one time, all our used vehicles, whatever, that he was, what do you call it, eBay or whatever, the auction thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called. Because I remember he was selling a lot of our old vehicles instead of putting it for an auction block. He just was advertising, and that's how we were moving them at one time. I don't know if we're still doing it or not.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
That's what I would say. That way it gives a chance for any fire department, ours, or in the district here, plus others from other towns have an option to go for it from there. I think it's a fair trade.
When do we make a decision on this? Because I think it'd be good to work with the fire department and keep the truck in the community if they can use it.
There's really no deadline. I just brought this up to John's attention about 3 weeks ago. And so this is our first opportunity to discuss it with you.
Russ, this is Green, and I have a question. The fire district has to have special training to go down and work at the airport. Is that correct?
Okay, that's very muffled. I'm having a hard time with that, Mike. Something about training.
The fire district requires training, special training to work at the airport. for aircraft fires, fuel depot fires, etc.?
No, they are not. When we had our certificate before Boutique came in with smaller aircraft, there were 3 individuals, myself included, that had special aircraft firefighting training. But the what they call mutual aid, in this case, the fire department, they are not required to take that training.
Would we be able to trade this truck for them getting training to get better responses at the airport?
I'm sorry, Mike, I'm really having a hard time with the echo on your transmission. Can somebody else relay what he's saying?
Yeah, Russ, can we trade the truck for training for the fire department?
I'm not sure I understand the context of the question.
Give them the truck and they promise to get more training for airport fires.
I I hadn't considered that. I don't know. That would be dependent upon the fire department's response to that question.
Thanks, Russ.
Russ, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Arlen.
Here.
Is there a process, say you were to have an offer on the truck, or in order to put it up for auction, or however that would be handled? I guess, John, you would be privy to this too. How would we go about doing that? Would you need an approval from city council, or would this be something you could just handle as an expense to sell the truck if you had an offer?
That would be a Rick Smith question, or perhaps John knows. I don't know.
I believe it would be if the council declares it surplus, and you wanted it just put out generally, we would go ahead and do that. Probably put a minimum bid on it, and then whatever the bid on it, we would bring back to the council for approval to sell it for that price. And we would have on there that we reserve the right to reject any and all bids.
Okay.
From an accounting standpoint, David, it would be a revenue line item within the airport fund. It would not be an expense. We've fully depreciated it as an asset.
I see.
And
Thank
the FAA has already given their blessing on disposal of it in any manner we choose. We fulfilled our grant obligations because we held it for 20 years.
I see. Thank you.
Russ, I have one more question. You mentioned earlier about the foam capabilities and the carcinogenic properties of that. Can that just lay down water like it was used for a wildfire?
Yeah.
Do you have to use foam?
No, you don't have to use foam. In fact, the fire department, we're talking that they would probably just make it a water-only truck. They would take off the dry chem capabilities and replace that with a water tank as well, just to increase their water supply. Right now it's 500 gallons. I think they were talking about it adding an additional 250 to 300 to give them more agent in the event of a wildland fire.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council. So maybe you can put this up for discussion at a later date. We got a lot of information presented to us tonight. I'm sure we'd like to donate it or give it, have it city fire protection district use it, but we'd also like to put it up for bid. So maybe we need to discuss this at a later date. John,
Would you like it put on a work session and an agenda, or just an agenda for an actual vote?
Wouldn't this be an in-house thing? Administrating thing that, John? Don't you think it's just be you guys take care of this in the house?
Well, we will if council declares it a surplus and then makes a decision on how they would want it disposed of.
That's what I was just wondering, because all the other vehicles that if we sell or auction or whatever, and we don't vote on each one, so I thought it'd just be.
We bring you a list and it's like, these need to be declared surplus, and you just, generally it's on consent agenda and you just do it. But this is a little bigger item, and it's I think it will have more demand than the cars do.
It's up to council. I'm just asking out there, so thank you.
Can we do a work session where the fire department is a part of the conversation, or the fire district is a part of the conversation? And then we can also have it on the agenda.
That sounds good. I'd like to get some fire department feedback on that also.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is discussion of having Wi-Fi outside city buildings with City Manager John Doherty.
At the last meeting, I believe council talked about having Wi-Fi available 24/7 outside of city buildings. I discussed it with the IT department. I have not discussed it with the PD, but IT had some concerns, which I took up with City Attorney Green, and that's not a concern. But my concern would be an attractive nuisance. Who, under normal circumstances, would need to be on a free Wi-Fi at 1 o'clock in the morning in a park? So I don't have any problem with free Wi-Fi, and I think it's, once the kids get in school, I think it's gonna be very important. But I would recommend, and perhaps the police chief has a different idea, but shut it off at midnight till 6 a.m. or something like that, so we don't have people parking in our parking lots when we don't want people in our parking lots. As the old saying was, nothing good ever happened after 10 o'clock. So I can't imagine anything really good happening at 2 or 3 in the morning outside using a, not going to be kids doing their homework anymore. It's going to be people who probably shouldn't be on the internet. But it's not something that needs to be decided tonight. We can put it off and you can think about it a little bit. And I don't know if the police chief has anything more to add, but that was my thoughts. I have some concerns about 24/7 outside of our building.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment since I was the council member who brought this subject up. So this is Rachel. I feel like access to internet is a service that we should provide to our community. We're service oriented, and I don't see this as a ridiculous ask. We are not the only ones doing this in the country, in the world, and I think we're going to be behind on this. I think it's important to our community to have access to internet, and if that means only doing it from 6 a.m. to 11 to avoid the middle of the night, that's fine. But I feel like it's necessary to have access to internet at least the Welcome Center, the library, and maybe City Hall after work hours, after business hours, and on Saturday and Sunday. Because I can think of a million scenarios why that's important, and I understand that IT is worried, and then about the security, and that you are worried about what's going to happen in the parking lot, but that doesn't mean this is impossible. I say it's worth trying for at least until the end of the school year next year, because kids are about to start school and we have no idea what's going to happen, if it's going to shut down and if they're going to have to do school from home again. But we need to at least provide this through the school year. That's how I feel anyways. And if it's such a hot topic, then I want to bring it to council and have a vote.
This is Green. I will speak slower and
speak up, Mike.
Speak up
and into the mic.
I am, and we got reverb, so okay. Could we check with some other communities? Because I'm aware of one or two communities doing this through their library, Bayfield for one, and see what limitations, what hours, what they've done for some of the questions. I mean, I've heard some really good questions and opinions about, well, what about this, what about that? And maybe somebody's already made the wheel and we don't have to reinvent it, is where I'm headed with this. We could borrow somebody's policy, somebody's practices, and see if they work here.
I think that'd be a good idea to check with other communities to see how they're doing their free Wi-Fi.
I'd like to get this rolling since school is going to be starting in the next few weeks. Can we do a trial run?
We are working on it already. The equipment's been ordered. It just hasn't been installed because it hasn't come in.
I think it would
You
be.
approved buying the equipment at the last meeting, so we put the orders in. We're just waiting on it to come in. And before we did it, I just wanted to have this discussion. We are going to be installing it. That's not the question. The question is, do we want to limit the hours is all.
I think it would be fine for us to do a trial run and then see how it goes through perhaps this school year, the end of the year. And then we can revisit it at a later time if it turns out to be like crazy or it turns out to not work very well. And I think that there should be a limit, a time frame for when that Wi-Fi is accessible. I would say the 6 to 11 would be fine.
Okay, any other discussion on this item?
I guess my thing would be like everybody's been talking about, just to check what other communities doing, because if you have it that late, I don't know how they're going to benefit the kids. I mean, they benefit the kids, but I'm just wondering how, if they're going to drive up to the parking lot or what. So I guess I still need more info on it myself.
Mayor Levy, may I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to let you know, Rachel, that, being cautious and does not mean we don't support this activity. We do support it, but we want to make sure it's done properly and safely for the city. And we also agree as a team that this is a good service to provide, but we just need to make sure that it's done right on our side. And then, like John said, he and the chief have their concerns as well. So we are not reluctant to doing this. We just want to do it safely.
I respect that.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, we can discuss this further. We haven't set up the Wi-Fi yet, so once it's up and running, then we can kind of decide the hours and maybe even do a trial run on it. And we'll check with other communities before we make any solid decisions. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, see, it's 7:23. We have the regular session in about 7 minutes. So I think we might use this time to adjourn for a few minutes, and at 7:30 we'll return to our regular agenda. So if you can put us on pause, Bill. This workshop is adjourned. Thank you.